The last time the Iowa Hawkeyes played USC at the Coliseum was 1976. The final score, USC 55, Iowa 0. But that wasn't the last time they played. I'll tell you about that game coming up. I got Trent Condon from Locked On Hawkeyes. We're doing a crossover show. So make sure you stick around. We're going to be talking about everything this USC-Iowa game. And we might even have a couple of fun stories to talk about from prior matchups. That's all coming up next on this crossover edition of Locked On USC and Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On USC, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone, and welcome to a crossover edition of Locked On USC. I'm your host, Mark Culkin, and that's Trent Condon from the Locked On Hawkeyes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is also now the #1 sports podcast network. So whether you're watching this show on YouTube, wherever you want to download this podcast, you pick the platform. This show's always going to be free, and this show is always going to appreciate your support. Trent, I am so glad we're doing this.
Yeah.
Welcome, Lord. Thanks again.
I'm excited. I'm excited to do this, Mark. And, for us, we hang out with the youngsters, right, on the squad shows. I'm sure plenty of our viewers and listeners hear us from time to time on with those guys. It's nice to talk to a veteran, somebody a little bit more seasoned, like myself, because there are times that I feel like with the rest of our group, who we love,
Sure.
but it's sometimes like, I don't know, pounding your head into a wall. There's can be some rough moments, as I found out a couple of weeks ago with Jacob from Locked On Hoosiers.
As they say, kids will say the darndest things sometimes.
Yes, absolutely.
So I mentioned the last time Iowa played at the Coliseum, quite a while ago. The Trojans and the Hawkeyes, though, they played each other since then. I think 2019 Holiday Bowl. All I remember was some guy named Smith Marset literally going through the Trojans like a hot knife through butter. That final score was 49-24. In fact, it was actually a pretty good game until Slovis had to leave with an elbow injury. So, Trent, last week, you guys suffered one of those gut punch type of losses to Oregon. Mm-hmm. And again, and maybe it's just me, but aren't all of Iowa's losses close punch of games? I guess. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mark, it's kind of funny this week because the big narrative after another tough loss, the two most difficult ones this year of the three losses being just a whisker away from beating Oregon, same thing against Indiana. We know how good both those and talented both those teams are, is Iowa's now lost 12 consecutive games against ranked opponents. And the difference, though, is for the beginning part of that losing streak, they haven't been like this. 2 times in the Big Ten championship game, getting blown out by Michigan, getting pulverized last year by Ohio State. And I have taken it this week that, it still sucks to have this losing streak, right? You want to end that losing streak and get that negative connotation out of there, but it feels so much different than having no chance going into the games. I was right there. I was close. And with a bounce here, a bounce there, this team is 8-1 going into this football game, and we're having a completely different conversation. Mark Gronowski leaves the game against Indiana. The backup quarterback can't complete a screen pass on 3rd and 5. If he does, they got a chip shot field goal to win the game. They don't. Missed field goal on a long field goal. And we know what happened is Indiana came down to score. And then, of course, you saw what happened a week ago. So this team is incredibly close. But yes, there was a lot of those blowouts during that. And now it feels like Iowa, they are taking steps forward here and getting back to that competitive nature that I think historically people think of Iowa football.
Well, you know what? I can relate to that. That was the story of USC last year. They were close in every game. They held leads late in the fourth quarter of every game, except for that game against Notre Dame at the Coliseum, which they were driving to tie the score, and then all of a sudden things changed. So let me ask you this question, since we can both relate to being close but getting no cigar at the end. What do you anticipate from the Hawkeyes in LA in the rain, which you guys are pretty familiar with, against a USC team that's they're fighting for that playoff berth right now? They're 7-2, and everything's there right in front of them.
There's a lot of when you're kind of building up the chances for Iowa. I think there's a lot of negatives in this game, and one of the biggest ones is the way that went last week against Oregon. Listening to the players on Tuesday during the media availability, and we just get guys once a week. We don't get opportunities to watch practice like I think you guys do at USC. So our time is really limited of what we get. That's Fort Ferentz. He's got things covered up there, and we're not allowed very often. But when we do on Tuesdays, I think you still heard a very down nature. You heard a team that was still frustrated. Mark Gronowski said, he's never lost 3 games in his career. I mean, you look at South Dakota State, you look at the high school level, that guy's never lost 3 games in a season ever. And here he is with 3 losses already this year. So I think they're down, but I will go back and maybe bring the positive spin from the Iowa angle.
Sure.
One of Kirk Ferentz's greatest strengths, I believe, as a football coach is not the X's and O stuff. It's not the longevity, not the offensive line, which he's a guru at. It's not that. It's his ability when a team back against the wall, nobody believes in them after a devastating loss like that. The even-keeled nature that he is as a person and as a football coach is his strength. There's been so many times in the past where it felt like they're going to get beat twice. Don't let Oregon beat you twice. And this one kind of feels like that. And if it was almost any other coach, I think that might be a problem. That is one of Kirk Ferentz's greatest strengths, though. They are so even-keeled as a football team that I don't think that'll be the reason that they lose. Will there be other reasons they can lose Saturday? Absolutely. I don't think that'll be the reason, though.
Look, there's a reason he's stuck around for as long as he has. And I get it. Midwest is a lot different than LA, the spotlight and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if USC would. Let me just put it this way. I think it's abnormal to have head coaches stick around for as long as Kirk's been at Iowa.
And
win or lose, just sticking around.
Yeah, Hayden was there before him from 78 until 98, so 20 years before that. So I'm in my mid-40s, and I only know 2 football coaches. I mean, think of that. I'm 45 years old, and I've only seen 2 football coaches in my life as a Hawkeye fan. It's unthinkable, but that's our reality. Now, expectations, I think, at Iowa are a little bit different at USC. It's the consistent winner that he's built. Ferentz, that's another thing that you have to credit. You see the pro. I mean, you guys have dealt with it yourselves. And there just aren't those lulls. When you go through and you look at it during this tenure and after year number 3, when he got him to a bowl bid, they have been bowl eligible 24 out of 25 seasons. Yeah, 6 wins isn't a great benchmark, but at a place like Iowa, it's a pretty good place to be. Now we're waiting for that breakthrough moment, and we're hoping it'll come Saturday in the rain.
Well, we're hoping it doesn't, but hey, that's why we're doing this. Well, let me ask you this, because we want to accentuate the positives that Iowa has. Tell USC fans about, because these are the 3 players that really worry me.
Okay.
Concern me. You've got Caden Weegen, you've got your running back Kamari Moulton, and then everybody knows about Mark Gronowski. There was actually USC was kind of looking at him, bringing him in before he chose Iowa. Who else should USC be concerned about on offense besides the offensive line? But are those basically the 3 players that USC should be concerned with?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. The tight end position's been hit hard by injury this year. Probably their best guy right now is a former walk-on redshirt freshman. And you guys are running back, know a little something about walk-ons. Doesn't mean they're bad, as we obviously know. And I think he's going to be the next in line of Iowa tight ends as you see them filtered around. DJ Vodemy is his name. He had on that 93-yard drive that gave Iowa the lead in the 4th quarter. Remember that 40-yard pass down the field? He was a kid that got behind the defense there and made the big play there. Now, he's still young. He's still got a long ways to go, but you're looking at upside and looking down the line, maybe playing, a Big Ten fantasy league. He might be your tight end next year in his sophomore campaign. He's going to be a good one. The wide receiver group is not good. I mean, let's be frank. It's just there aren't anybody that can blow the top off. Their best wide receiver probably throughout the course of the season has been Sam Phillips. He's listed at 5'7". I mean, listed at 5'7". So that shows you his height. He made a big catch on the sideline against Oregon. They've got Reese Vanderzee back. He's another big wide receiver that's been injured for most of the season. 6'4" kid, had a touchdown against Minnesota. But yeah, you mentioned the guys that I think are most important. And Gronowski, I think people see what he's done with his legs now. 13 rushing touchdowns this season, how good he's been there. The question is, and our friends over at FanDuel, take a guess, Mark. I don't know if you saw the prop market for this one. Over under Mark Gronowski's passing yards coming up this weekend against the Trojans.
Well, see, this is interesting because one of USC's Achilles heels on defense until recently has been their secondary. So I will say that Mark Gronowski will still not get 200 yards this year in this game, but I think he will be north of 150.
Well, you're right in the right range. It was what I looked on, I think it was Wednesday morning that I looked, it was 160.5 was the over-under for his passing yards. Now, the other element is going to be the rain, and that's something that I'm going to be interested about too as we continue. Mark, want to talk about that. I want to flip it around to you two. Sure. We know Makai Lemon. We know about Mayava. I want to get, for the Hawkeye fans out there, a couple other names that we should be keeping an eye on.
Absolutely. We'll do that in the next segment. That's coming up. But we got to take care of a little business first. And then you and I, we're going to, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about past USC Iowa games and maybe talk a little smack about some other conference brethren as well. That's all coming up next. So it's almost the weekend, which means it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on who delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving money every time you order. These are the players and coaches that delivered when it mattered most. So for USC, they had a really nice win over Northwestern. Friday night, had a little bit of everything. You had Coach Riley's sneaky, legal, by the way, fake punt. You can use that. You can go Jaden Mayava with his bone-crushing tackle, saving a pick six from happening. Or maybe it was just Jacoby Lane sticking up his Velcro hand and having that one-handed touchdown in the end zone. Those are the guys that delivered. So just like DoorDash delivers your Saturdays, with DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day. Only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period runs through November 18th. All right, so Trent, you asked a question. First, no, I don't want to forget this. You and I, we want to say thank you for making Locked On USC and the Locked On Hawkeye podcast show your first listen every single day. And also want to say thank you for making Locked On the #1 podcast network, period. So let me ask you this, Trent. You mentioned walk-on. USC has a really special walk-on running back. His name is King Miller. He has 636 yards. Part-time starter this year. He's ran for 100 in 3 of his last 4 games. Will USC be able to run the ball against Iowa?
So before last week, I would have said it'll be difficult because teams in general have struggled. And coupled with the way that Iowa improved defensively through the month of October, boy, with what Oregon did, though, 261 yards rushing last week against Iowa in the rainstorm on top of it, knowing there wasn't a ton of threat of passing, and Iowa still wasn't able to do it. Here's another thing. Iowa's got 3 really veteran guys on their defensive line. Their 2 defensive ends, Max Llewellyn and Ethan Hurkett, along with defensive tackle Aaron Graves, who was all Big Ten last year. 3 guys that have played a ton of football. They played a lot more snaps than normal last week, and they still couldn't get off the field. That's really concerning to me, that veteran presence. Linebacker has been a question mark here. I think this is a game that USC is going to – it's not going to be, we ran 22 times for 63 yards. It's not going to be a game like that. I think they're going to get theirs. The question always for me is the game plan for Riley and company. Are they willing to take the 4.2 yards carry, right? We're getting some yards. We're getting enough. We're getting first downs because that's when Phil Parker's at his best. When teams get impatient, that's when his defense thrives. So that's kind of that cat and mouse game that I'm looking for here. Is the offensive staff for USC willing to be patient against Iowa? Because if you're not, that's when teams normally get in trouble.
So you bring that point up, which I think is a perfect segue. And this really got my attention last week, USC hosting Northwestern. First possession on offense, 16-play drive for USC.
Yeah.
Over 7 minutes. If I told you that they passed it 11 times out of those 16 plays, you would do that. You would give me that. Really? Are you kidding me? Look, USC was patient. They've shown that, yes, we'll be methodical if that's all you're going to give us. Mm-hmm. But you raised a really good point. Phil, you got your Phil Parker, your defensive coordinator, genius. Lincoln Riley, genius on offense. This is where this chess match is going to be really interesting to me because number one, we talked about King Miller. I don't know if you want to throw his body into the line, more than 20 times a game. There's no depth behind him right now. There's a reason why he's playing. You brought up Makai Lemon. Do they incorporate him into the running game a little bit more, or does Jaden Mayava become a little bit more Mark Gronowski and become, USC's second leading rusher, which I'm all for. I mean, he's big enough. He's 6'4", 230. He can handle that type of play. Then again, Iowa's known for their physicality. Let's flip the script. Will USC be able to stop Iowa's run game, especially Gronowski?
So you talked a little bit earlier about Moulton, Iowa's top running back. I was really deep at this position, but all four of their top backs have been hurt at one time or another this season. We saw Moulton miss a couple of games. Jazzion Patterson's kind of been the number 3 guy for a while. He was out. He came back last week. But they've really been relying mostly on Moulton. He has been the guy. And if you go through and you watch the tape, he has had so many of those 6-8 yard runs where it's a linebacker just getting a hand on a shoe as he's going through the hole and he gets cut down there. It feels like he is so close so many times this season to popping one, and he just hasn't. He had last year as a backup to Caleb Johnson. I think he had like a 70-yard run against Maryland, and it feels like one's in there. It just hasn't happened this year. I think that's what I was going to need. If I was going to be able to have a big day on the ground and, get him over 100 yards, there's going to have to be one of those big chunk plays in there, I think, to do it. The offensive line's playing at a really high level, but it feels like they're so comfortable, maybe a little bit too comfortable just with Moulton out there at the running back. I would like to see a little bit more playing time. Xavier Williams, he's more of the bigger running back. He's a redshirt freshman. He's 228 pounds, big, solid kid back there. I mentioned Jazzion Patterson, who runs hard, doesn't have a ton of speed. He just runs so dang hard. You like to see him out there a little bit more. I personally would like to see a little bit more rotation, but I anticipate it's going to be about what we've seen basically the last month. It's going to be a whole lot of Moulton. Will they be able to run it? I think a little bit. I don't think this is going to be a game, though, where they're going to put up 220 yards rushing, anything like that. Looking at your numbers. Yeah. I mean, you get to that number, and then we throw the other angle in here, and it's that weather part of it. Mark, we just dealt with this last week.
Right.
But it's not just the weather condition, the rain, I should say, in the game. It's the grass conditions. And I'm sure your USC listeners and viewers right now are like, when's he talking about grass? Iowa's been terrible on the grass. And I'll give you a couple instances. Earlier this year against Iowa State, Caden Weegen, who we talked about earlier, Iowa's All-American return man, he slipped multiple times during the game. He was wearing field cleats. He was not wearing grass cleats on the field and had one of his worst games in a Hawkeye uniform. A year ago, they go out to Michigan State, as we know, not a very good Michigan State team. They get absolutely ran off the field. It was one of the worst tackling games I've ever seen for Iowa football under Phil Parker. Where was that great game played? On grass in East Lansing. And yes, the jokes from a decade ago, Iowa against Christian McCaffrey in the Rose Bowl. We all saw how that went. What was one of the big conversations from the Iowa side afterwards, though? All the guys slipping on the field, not having the right cleats. I will give you a name, Greg Morris. And you probably look at your roster and say, that I don't see a Greg Morris. He's Iowa's equipment manager. He might be the key to the game because they got to have the right cleats on the grass and on top of it now, possibility in this monsoon.
I was going to say, it's a long walk down the tunnel from your locker room to the field at the Coliseum. It's an iconic walk, but before you step on the grass, what you say his name was, Greg what?
Greg Morris.
Greg Morris should be saying, show me your shoes.
Yeah.
Show me your kicks. Mm-hmm. Lift up your feet. And if you don't have on the right shoes, you're going back to the locker room, right?
Right. Yeah. This is the only place you're going to get this kind of breakdown right here on this crossover lockdown, right?
Well, look, let's give Phil Parker his flowers. What's he going to do to make Jaden Mayava's life more difficult? Because one of the things that Jaden has struggled with is throwing interceptions. So far this year, he's been pretty good. 17 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. However, he's thrown one in the last 5 games, each of the last 5 games. What can Phil do to say, hey, Jaden, you're not supposed to be throwing it here. You're supposed to be throwing it over there.
So what we saw historically under Phil Parker, very patient, something we kind of talked about earlier, right? That patience of the Iowa defense, got to be methodical, have to make the makeables. That's how you're able to move the football down. Then they get in the red zone and they really clamp down. The turnovers that Iowa normally is forced has kind of dried up the last couple of seasons. I think the reason for that is the ineptitude of the offense. Teams have realized we don't have to take chances against Iowa because even if we have to punt the ball back to them, that offense isn't going to do anything. Now, as Iowa's taken a few steps forward now offensively last couple of years, maybe that's coming back. But what we've seen more than anything this year is Iowa has blitzed more this season than they ever have under Phil Parker. You go back to that Indiana game when they had the Hoosiers on the ropes and they had Mendoza outside of the first drive of the game. He looked awful. He did not look like an All-American, certainly not like a Heisman contender. And that was pressure from all over the place. The thing that I also think that Parker is bringing more pressure this year, he doesn't trust his linebackers like he normally does. Had a couple of all Big Ten guys, including All-American Jay Higgins last year, Jack Campbell before that, who's been a star with the Detroit Lions. But also, I think he knows that the defensive line can't get to the quarterback. But on top of it, the safeties are actually really good at getting the quarterback off those blitzes. So many times they bring pressure and like, oh, why are they even trying? They're not going to get home, right? This year's team, for whatever reason, Xavier Wampa, really good at that role. Zach Lutmer, who will play both cornerback and he'll play safety, also plays their cash position, their fifth defensive back. He is really good coming off the edge. So I think that's also probably another reason. That's the part, though. We see him playing kind of traditional Iowa defense or that game plan that they use. They used it also a lot against Penn State, a lot more pressure than in the past. So if you've seen Phil Parker's teams, you remember maybe the way that they played defensively going back to 2019. This one could look a lot different than what they do traditionally.
Interesting. Okay. Something to keep an eye on there. But look, I don't know exactly what the weather's going to be like. I know it's going to be raining. Mm-hmm. How much does that change Lincoln Riley's play calling? Does he just become a little bit more methodical, stick to that scripted out thing like they did against Northwestern? Or, does he still try and, take chances and go over the top? We'll find out. This is going to be an interesting game. I think the weather favors Iowa, but I think USC has the athletes to out-athlete the Hawkeyes. So we'll see how that goes. We got one more segment to go. USC, Iowa, they've got some history. We talked about a couple of the other games. I know they played in a really fun Orange Bowl back in, to start the 2003 year.
It was fun for a minute.
I got a story about that. I'm sure Trent's got some stories as well.
Yes.
We're gonna have some fun in the third segment before we get out of here. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you just want to, you want to ride that hot hand, guess what? FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to those fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay, and you're going to get a shot at a huge payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so before we get to our predictions here, Trent, first of all, I got to ask you this question. Is it true? Is it true? Does Nebraska corn taste better than Iowa corn?
No, absolutely not. Well, I got to be honest. I think all corn is gross. I've tried. No. I know. I've tried. I got to be honest with you, though, Mark. If it was any of our other colleagues here on the Lockdown Network, I wouldn't even admit that. But yeah, I don't like sweet corn, and my family thinks I'm crazy and everybody else. But everybody in Iowa knows, yes, Iowa corn much better than Nebraska corn.
First of all, I love corn. I love cream corn. I love sweet corn. I love cornbread. You give me corn, and I love it. It's like favorite vegetable in the world. Also, I got to ask, and this is actually kind of a serious question, a half serious question. Do you guys still do the hokey pokey after a win in the locker room?
No, we do not. Done the hokey pokey plenty of times with my tailgate group. Done it when we closed the Metrodome with a 55-0 win over the Gophers in the final game there before they moved to TCF Bank Stadium. My group, buddies still do it, but yeah, that was a Hayden thing, and that died afterwards. So yeah, they just do the fight song as quick as possible, in the locker room. That's kind of what they do. But I can see Hayden Fry liked to be a little bit more out there. He showed up for a pregame press conference one time in bib overalls after Minnesota called us a bunch of farmers. So he actually played the role. Kirk Ferentz is not going to do those kind of things. Kirk is buttoned up, very polished, kind of boring, not going to get those kind of things. And yeah, unfortunately, we don't get the hokey pokey anymore.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I cannot wait till USC returns a trip to Kinnick because I am looking forward to the first quarter Children's Hospital way. That
It's incredible.
I love that type of stuff. So I'm all over that. I do have to tell this funny story though. So USC Iowa 2003 Orange Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, Iowa was leading for a minute.
7-0.
But you guys were having a lot of fun prior to that game.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling yourselves. You thought, hey, no way this US team's going to beat us. No way in hell. So as we know, as the game went along, it was USC scoring again. Final score, USC 38. Iowa, what was the
17?
Final?
38-17.
Yeah. So walking from the stadium to the parking lot, there's this guy wearing all of his Iowa regale, all of his paraphernalia, hat, jersey, everything. He's laying on the ground. He's got both hands over his ears, and he's just writhing back and forth. Make it stop. Please make it stop. We're like, are you okay? He's going, I can't get your damn fight song out of our head.
That guy might have been me, because I had the exact same thought after that one. I was in the upper deck. It felt like I was in the first row after that opening kickoff. And that fight song over and over and over again. Oh, that one, it was a ton of fun. I mean, the tailgate, that was Iowa's first major bowl game, too, in over a decade. After the end of the Hayden era, Ferentz's early era, it got so down. Iowa went 1-10 in Kirk's first season. He had an 2-18 in his first 20 games as a head coach. Hayden's final year, they went 3-8. I mean, we hit some lows, and then we take that step forward and play in that kind of game and the kind of season that they had. That was a really
good Iowa team.
They really were. And also remember, they not only back then, the Big Ten didn't play Thanksgiving weekend. Remember back then, they ended before. Iowa's bye week that year actually was the final week of the regular season. Their season was done in the middle of November. I mean, they didn't play for 7 weeks before that game. Yeah, and Brad Banks is going all around the country, getting his awards and all over the place. The guys went home. I know they had a big Florida contingent. Guys were home for like almost 3 weeks. That team just was not ready to play. And the team that we saw then, if we had a playoff like we do today, I would be very confident that 2002 Iowa team would have given USC a great game. And if we would have had a 12-team playoff then, if we were on other sides of the bracket, those two teams easily could have faced off. I think Iowa would have beat Ohio State at the end of that season. And certainly Miami, they had some dudes, didn't they?
That was a pretty good Miami roster.
That's dudes.
But I still remember Kirk Herbstreit when he was calling that game. He's saying, hey, you know what? There's one team in the country I don't think anybody wants to play.
Uh-huh.
That was USC. Again, Carson Palmer won the Heisman Trophy. Brad Banks was a runner-up. That was a really good Iowa team. And I understand the outcome wasn't the way you wanted it, but it was still, both of our programs at that point had just come back.
Yes.
At least USC had come back from, living in the doldrums. And then from there forward, it was just Pete Carroll and that dynasty went forward. What do you want to talk about, Trent? Usually on a Friday show, I have to do a Friday rant. Is there anything you want to get off your chest or talk about, or maybe, remember from a past USC Iowa game, whatever you want to talk about?
I want to go this direction since we got a lot of you West Coasters now with us. So we had our first really indoctrination into the guys north of you, the Oregon Ducks. And it started, Iowa was on a bye the week before, as was Oregon. The momentum was building. If Iowa runs the table, gets to 10-2, they're going to be in the playoff. We know the way the game played out. But dealing with these Oregon fans, what a weird group of people. From Phil Parker talks for 5 minutes about how great Oregon is. In the middle of this, he says they're well-funded, which they are.
Sure.
People don't take every positive thing that he said about every part of that offense. They took that one little nugget and think it's a slight. No, that's not true. You're idiots. Then we get after the game, and still on my comment page, it's Wednesday, Thursday, nonstop comments about how bad the officiating was. By the way, Caden Weegen's fumble, we never saw a clear recovery from USC. How about coming up the sideline, CM Phillips is going to go in for a touchdown. He gets yanked from behind. No flag on that one. Offensive holding all game long. Oh, but Iowa only had one penalty. Duck fans, guess what? Iowa is the least penalized team in the country this year, the last 5 years, and the last 10 years. This is the way that Iowa plays. That group is definitely at the bottom of my list of newbies. Their online fan base sucks.
Well, I like to refer to that group as the least sophisticated fan base in the country. I'm sorry you've had that experience. We've been dealing with them a little bit longer than you have, unfortunately. But yeah, they're a bunch of guys, people, lumberjacks, who, they think they were born on third base. Problem is they can't get off of third base. They're stuck there. They've never crossed home plate. So they lash out and they like to let everybody know, look how good we are. Look how good we are. Well, talk to me when you've got a trophy in that trophy case. So I feel you, Trent. I'm sorry you had to deal with that.
You get to deal with him next week.
I know. Well, and I've been kind of soft teasing this a little bit. If USC gets by Iowa this weekend, or I should be saying when USC gets by, keep everything positive. Next week on the internet, it could be some of the most toxic things you've ever seen. USC and Oregon fans, they don't like each other. There's no real rivalry there because USC is, you look at, historically USC's owned that rivalry. And for whatever reason, whenever USC has to play Oregon, it's always up there, it seems like. And guess what? That's where we're playing again, week after we play Iowa. So the internet might break. It could get pretty ugly.
I'm going to be tuning in next week for the crossover with you and Spencer. I will definitely be tuning in for that one.
Who does Iowa have this week coming up? Before we get there, let's do our game predictions. Getting ahead of ourselves. Look, before the rains came, I thought it was going to be nicer weather. I had USC 37, Iowa 13-17, somewhere right around that range, 30, maybe 20 points. Now, because it's going to be that inclement weather, I'm taking a touchdown off the board. I'm going USC 30, Iowa 13. Where do you see the game?
Kind of same range. I just think that's a bad matchup for Iowa. I'm hopeful that the rain is going to slow you guys down a little bit, take away some of the deep passing threat, and keep everything congested down a little bit. Can Iowa pass the ball enough to make them hurt? I just can't get there. I have 27-16 USC winning this one. And we didn't even talk about much during this one. Iowa has struggled so much on the West Coast, not just Rose Bowls. Early in Kirk's tenure, they went to Arizona and Arizona State. They got blown out by Arizona State back in 04, 08. They got beat by a pretty decent Arizona team when Iowa was really good going into that season. They've had so many troubles. In fact, Kirk said after that Arizona game, he was never going to go back to the West Coast. Well, now, obviously, he's got to do it every single year. But that aside, that's been another issue. Go back to last year. You guys saw the game against UCLA where Iowa's a lot better than last year's UCLA team. They just got beat by the Bruins. So that's kind of another angle here. Until Iowa proves it that they can win a regular season game on the left coast, I got to see it before I'm going to actually call for it.
Understood. Hey, look, USC was in a similar situation that they're feeling good right now. Last time they were going out to Illinois, and that didn't turn out the right way. They had all the advantages. Illinois had just gotten their butts kicked the week before, and things just didn't turn out that way. So on any given Saturday, Trent, you never know. Like I said, you got that running quarterback, which is something USC has struggled with historically. You've got that gadget player in Caden Weegen, who also special teams maven. And if I was bringing their lunchbox and they're coming to play physical, hard-nosed, smash-mouth, Big Ten football, we'll see if USC's up to that because they haven't been really good against the run to start the game. It takes them a while to kind of get revved up.
And Iowa's had really slow starts this season, and they'll take the ball. If Iowa wins the toss, they do not defer. They take the ball every single time, and then they usually turn it over, and they're in a 7-0 hole. Or 2-0 like last week.
Trent, tell everybody where they can find you when you're not doing the Locked On Hawkeye show. What else do you do?
Yeah, I host a daily radio show on the Iowa Sports Radio Network. I've been on the air now for 20 years here across the great state of Iowa. 106.3 KXNO in Des Moines and stations scattered across the state, along with Locked On Hawkeyes. And I'm going to be busy coming up here this evening as we got the big school semifinals. So got a couple of football games I'll be calling on Friday night. Then on Saturday, making my way over to the Wild Rose Casino over in Jefferson. And we're going to have a meet and greet with former of that 2002 Iowa team against USC, the tight end that won the Mackey Award. Dallas Clark's going to be there. So going to be hanging out there, doing a little game watching Iowa USC, and we'll have a rapid reaction Locked On Hawkeyes after that one too.
Yep, I will be. I'll be there for the instant reaction to the Locked On USC show as well. Trent, thank you so much for doing this. Hopefully we'll do it again soon. We got basketball season, so you never know, right? Till that next episode, everyone, you know what to do.